Welcome to Liquid, how CFOs outperform. I'm Tom Gavaghan.
And I'm Holly McNulty, Solutions Engineer here at Kyriba and former Treasury practitioner.
Today, Holly and I are joined by two special guests, Kevin Lammers, former CFO and financial leader, as well as my good friend, Dory Malouf, who currently leads our value engineering team here and is a former Treasury leader across multiple organizations. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for giving us some time and talking with us today. Kevin, it's evident that you fostered a culture of allowing your employees like Dory to be persistent in doing what they see as being right and not just, facing an obstacle or a hurdle and shutting down, which sometimes does happen with certain leadership styles. So as somebody who can relate, that is super important to have that type of atmosphere around you and encourage people like you were sharing to go and try things and celebrating those things. I think our audience on the podcast might actually get sick of hearing me say it, right? One of my favorite sayings is, when was the last time you tried something for the first time? We have to encourage people to try something new and perhaps fail at what they're doing, but learn from those mistakes. So it's something that is near and dear and important, I think, to all of us in this world of evolution and change that we're constantly going through, especially in today's kind of environment. I guess I'll go a little bit deeper with you, Kevin, on that topic a little bit more. How did you keep your teams educated? And then also, how did you keep them motivated? Because I think one might detract from the other sometimes, especially with, again, so many things going on that we have to keep up with, so many changes, regulatory changes, things like that we have to learn about and adapt to. How did you do that? How did you manage the educational and motivational aspects of your job?
Well, I think for one side, on the motivation side, for me, I wanted to develop a relationship with the team, and I wanted to go throughout the organization, not with my direct reports, but I want to be present. I want to get to know the people, and I would do things like breakfast with the CFO, where maybe we would have 8 or 10 key players come in, and we would have breakfast, and it was kind of a safe space where we could have a good, open conversation. We could talk about things. They really enabled me and made me present or available for them to ask me questions. Hey, why do we do this? Are we missing that opportunity? Why aren't we doing that? And really, it was good because it fostered communication, good, open communication. And I would also do it if I traveled out to a plant or a new geographic area. I would ask the general manager, hey, can I meet with 3, 4, or 5 people? And it might be a breakfast with CFO, it might be a lunch. It just might be hey, let's just take an hour and let's have an informal conversation. It then enabled me to understand and to help set the strategy, the vision. It enabled me to communicate the vision. I think you need to be empathetic. You need to recognize what the effort are that they put in. And then I want to recognize them and thank them for being part of the team, because it's the team that drives our success. And that's when I look at my career, if it wasn't for the teams, I would not be where I'm at today. Okay. Because it was always the teams that carried me forward. I think the other thing that we miss sometimes from a education or development standpoint is the need to remain current in technology. There's been so much that has changed in the last 30 years in technology. I mean, just think how much it's advanced in our daily lives and products and services and the tools we use at work. Everything. It's just, I learned a long time ago that as an early leader earlier in life that, when the change in this technology comes, you need to embrace it. Resisting technology is a losing battle. And you're better to embrace it and succeed than to resist it and get left behind.
I'm not going to argue that last point, obviously, and something we'll dig into for sure, something I've been echoing in this world of advancement in AI. Some are ignoring it. That's silly, in my opinion. You have to figure out a way to use it. Dory, one of the things I'll go for you on that question, one of the stories that always sticks out, and is so representative of you, is you always shared one of your jobs you had before coming to Kyriba when you managed or got hired to take over a team in Treasury. You shared that you sat down and sat with each person and did their job for a few weeks to get to know what they're actually doing, which I truly respect. what do you say as it relates to continuously evolving and making sure we're staying educated as well as motivated for managing our respective teams?
Yeah, I took the approach, and I was actually working with on Kevin's team there in the organization we worked out together. But you can't manage, in my opinion, what you don't know well enough in terms of how the process works and what are the nuances tied to it. And you can't manage people, especially coming in from the outside, without getting to know them, whether it's on the personal level or in what their challenges are day in and day out and what they do day in and day out. So sitting with each person for a week when I first started at that organization and trying to learn what they do, but then also a couple of days later actually doing what they did day in and day out helped me understand the process holistically, and it helped me understand the person themselves, because that we could do lunches together. We would share the challenges of a particular model or a particular process. That actually helped transition itself well to me understanding what does the team need in terms of best practices, because there wasn't a lot of best practices there when it comes to technology in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kevin, I think those were some good topics and maybe some easier ones. I'm going to get a little tougher now. So thinking back on your prior experience when you're sitting and managing the finance operations, can you share a little bit of how did your team ultimately manage, plan, and optimize liquidity?
I had a boss who was at the international level, and he talked about cash being the lifeline of an organization, the blood of an organization. And he's right. He would indicate that, we pay and reward our partners in cash, whether it be employees, suppliers, we pay our banks, and our shareholders. We pay them in cash. We don't pay them in operating income. We don't pay them in EBITDA. We pay them in cash. So when I'm looking at, how do we optimize our liquidity, I would look at each of our processes and ask myself, how do we optimize the cash flow? I look at operations, at our inventories, look at our fixed assets or our capital expenditures to make sure that we're optimizing what we're purchasing, because all these projects are competing for a limited resource, and the limited resource is cash. I want to make sure that we're looking at our fixed cost, because if there, with the uncertainty, if there's an economic downturn, ultimately it's fixed costs that spell doom for a company. And then the last thing, I think it comes back to culture. We need to drive culture so that when people are making decisions, they're making decisions with cash in mind. I mean, cash is too critical to leave it just to finance. Everybody should be driving improved cash, because again, we go back to, it's the lifeline, it's the blood of an organization, it's how we reward our partners. So it's what we need. We need cash. And if I could, cash is important both on a downside of an economy and also an upside. On the downside, it provides stability, sustainability. It gives you a chance to seize opportunities when they present themselves in good economic times. And opportunities also present themselves in poor economic times. But again, if you have the cash, if you have the resource, it allows you to realize them.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm observing a little bit on that, Kevin, is, and maybe it speaks to what I shared about how we're seeing such an uptick in activity as it relates to working capital programs, specifically like right now, like dynamic discounting. And I think it's because a lot of companies have built up the cash reserves in this anticipation of recession and all of these things. And now they're looking at how can they leverage that cash or deploy that cash in a different way to optimize, their overall liquidity or impact their earnings in that regard. But that is something that I have noticed happening in the market. Dory, I'm not sure from your perspective if you've seen similar on your end, but something I've noticed.
Yeah, one of the things that we hear a lot about is the cash conversion cycle. Now, treasurers can't impact inventory, right? But they can certainly impact the receivable side and the payable side, or all the programs we've been talking about, like factoring and supply chain financing, accelerating how quickly cash gets in the door and holding onto it for as long as possible, and then also, in the grand scheme of things, lowering your overall cost of capital. I do want to touch on something that Kevin mentioned as well, which is the ability to foster that culture where people are well aware that it's not your cash, right? It's the company's cash. So in every decision that you're making, you have that in mind, and because in turn, it ultimately impacts the organization's holistic resiliency and ability to take advantage of opportunities, as Kevin mentioned, when it presents himself, but also be resilient in times of uncertainty. So it's that culture piece that I think is very important, because all of that starts at the top, and I think that's what Kevin did a great job of when I was working with him, is in fostering that culture.
You mentioned the treasurer role. I think as leaders in setting the culture, one of the things, they can't control inventory level, but they can help educate. They can help. We used to do something what we called lunch and learn. I think it's finding ways of educating throughout the organization without placing an undue burden on the team. Hey, it's at lunch. I'm going to sit here and eat my lunch. Sure, I'll listen in. And it could be on Treasury. It could be on fixed assets. It could be on an accounting system. It could be on purchasing cards or how we're going to buy things. I think there's just a big opportunity to set the culture with education.
Yeah. Lunch and learns were always really popular when I was a practitioner as well. We did quite a few of those, and it was really just, like you said, just a great way to learn something about an area of the company that you might not touch frequently, or about something going on in the industry. Dory, you mentioned the cash conversion cycle. I know that's just like one metric that treasurers and CFOs use to measure financial health, but what would you say some of the most important metrics are for measuring that financial health and performance?
I'm always looking at the short-term liquidity of a company. And, to me, that's where it starts. Again, we talk about it being how critical cash is. You can, it's possible to have a very good looking income statement and be cash poor and actually have significant issues in a company. I also want to look longer term, and I want to anticipate when I talk the longer term. So if I know that I'm going to have to refinance and my debt's becoming due in a couple of years, and now is hey, the economy's good. Now might be the time that I'm negotiating with my bank to reset the terms, to extend the repayment date. Why? Because things are going well now. It's going to be a lot easier to do it today than if I wait 2 years. And if there is an economic downturn and there's a tightening on cash, and all of a sudden the company's forecasts don't look quite as good because the volume's not there. Now it's a lot more difficult. So I want to look at my short term because I need cash to run the daily operations. I want to think long term because I want to be able to extend my financing at the right time in favorable conditions. I like to learn from a lot of people, and I drive sometimes off of sayings, but I might not get this perfect, but John F. Kennedy supposedly said something to the effect of, the time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. So I want to anticipate. I want to look ahead. I want to be in a strong position now so that I can position us longer term. We certainly always look at operating margin. We look at cash flow, but one of the other things that I like to look at is return on capital employed, which is really the income that you're generating from your assets invested minus your short-term liabilities, non-interest bearing, which is basically free financing. Okay, so how do we drive that? And we look at, and it's the return on your capital employed in a particular accounting period, and it needs to be, for long-term success, in my mind, it needs to be better than your weighted average cost of capital in order to generate value. But I think the key is not to just look at it at the company level. You want to get some granularity. You want to do it by customer, by geographic region, by product, or by segment. Because what you might find is that you have some really strong performers that are hiding some underperformers in your overall average. And so you want that granularity. So you got, again, now it's back to data. So you need some tools that can handle large amounts of data that provide transparency that allow you to make decisions. So, and then I always step back and say, okay, how can I improve this? I can improve it on the income side, or how do I improve it on the invested capital side? And we talked about some of the tools earlier, whether it be factoring, supply chain financing, program management, and there's others out there.
Dory, I asked for your opinion on that as well, but also to see, is there any, you seeing any changes in this in terms of like emphasis over certain metrics versus others now more recently, or has it remained pretty consistent through all of the ups and downs we've been experiencing over the past 5 years?
Yeah, I think the cash conversion cycle has become like top of mind, right? Because that's how quickly you can turn your revenue. Revenue is not cash until it's collected, right? So that's how quickly you can turn those sales into actual cash. I want to touch on what Kevin said on the ROIC or return on capital employed, so ROCE. They're both kind of very similar. We used to track that in practice, to Kevin's point, by division when I was working at a home builder. And that granularity helped us during the 2008 cycle when, basically foreclosures were everywhere. Land went to worthless to the point where it was getting mothballed on the balance sheets, basically to reward pennies on the dollar for home builders that held it on their books. That granularity helped us position the organization from a capital structuring perspective to the point where we had enough resiliency and enough cash reserves to then target and do acquisitions on organizations that did not have that. So it's like that, those metrics, when they're optimal, those are the metrics that say you offer resiliency.
So digging a little bit deeper into this, so with all of this current economic uncertainty and all of this volatility that we're seeing, what metrics would you pay attention to the most before making capital market decisions or capital investment decisions?
I mean, for me, I worked in automotive, and it was very cash intensive, significant investments up front. So I was always looking at things like IRR, the internal rate of return on an investment. And that was because all these programs were competing for the same cash, which is limited, okay, which is a limited resource. I mean, certainly we're trying to optimize it, but you still want to make sure that you're investing your funds for the best value. And so I was always looking at that. I was looking at certainly liquidity and the IRR. So that's pretty much the big ones that I was looking for. And I think you also need to be careful with fixed cost, because again, fixed costs can become very burdensome should the economy turn south.
Yeah, when it comes to the IRR, I think it's important. I agree with you, Kevin, that there's that hurdle rate, right? You want that hurdle rate on any project. In most organizations that I work with, it was like 18 or 20%. I worked at some that was 22%. You definitely want it to be higher than your weighted average cost of capital so that you ensure some returns.
What I appreciate is the granularity that you guys have done this at as well, and how that speaks to what you said, Kevin, data, and having access to that data, and then also making the data workable as well. It's not just about accessing it, but being able to actually use it is another story that I think sometimes organizations struggle with. But ultimately, that is how you can achieve more broader success, like you were sharing. And if you are able to measure it, not just at an enterprise level or at the organizational level, being able to dig in at a business unit level, I think that's where, from my perspective, I see a lot of constraints happening because of disparate technologies or data not sitting where it should be, or maybe the data's there, but it's not being able to be used. That's what I think a lot of companies are struggling with now.
Yeah, I think it's that's the benefit of AI right now, right, Tom? It helps do a little bit of data cleansing, make sure that it's not garbage in, garbage out, and make sure that the data tells the story always.
Well, that's that. I prefaced that at the beginning of the conversation here, and something I do want to dig into, if we can shift gears there, on AI. And Kevin, I'd love to get your take in terms of what do you see in our world within finance and treasury, and how AI can impact our lives, or is impacting our lives. I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it comes down to, does it provide fast, consistent, reliable data? Does it help me anticipate? Does it help me make better decisions? Does it add value to the company to have this tool? And I think the answer to all of those questions is yes. I don't think it's going to totally replace the human element, but I think it's going to help you get better data more timely at a granularity that helps you make decisions. So I think it's a combination of AI on the data side and the human on the decision side. So I think it's a losing battle to resist it. It's here, it's coming. So now how do you utilize it to optimize performance and value?
And that's the part, is it's the human being able to interact and work with the AI. I mean, it's moved so quickly in the past 18 months in our personal lives, and now making its way into our professional lives. And it isn't perfect. It's far from it, as we know, but it is highly impactful when used correctly. And I think that is, to your point, Kevin, where we have an opportunity, to educate, going back to our conversation earlier, educate and inform the people that we're working with how to use AI in a appropriate way, in an effective way, knowing its imperfections, but it is there, and it is being used today to do all the things that you're talking about, and able in regards to being able to collect information, make sense of that information, help us make the decisions off that information, and it's moving extremely rapidly. I want to dive into this next segment where we go into CFO secrets. If you don't mind, Kevin, why is the relationship between treasurer and CFO so important?
Well, to me, it's a key strategic partnership. I mean, it needs to be one that's based on trust and open communication. Hey, if there's bad news, I want to know the bad news. If there's good news, I want to know the good news, and I want it to be transparent and accurate. If you look, to me, the treasurer and the treasury team are providing the governance over our critical asset of cash. So, and how do we utilize that cash? So to me, the treasurer is a key player in the long-term success of the company, because they're such a key strategic partner with the leadership team, not just the CFO, but the entire leadership team.
I think it's actually spot on, Kevin. I love the fact that right out of school, from internship days, I have been in Treasury. It is such a critical role in the organizations. It's a role where in good times, you're called upon to make sure that you set the organization for long-term success. And in bad times, you're called upon to make sure that you have resiliency there in the short and longer term. So I think, to your point, Kevin, it's like being transparent. I do remember a few occasions where forecasting was a challenge when we worked together. And I would be a little concerned to walk in and tell you, or have a conversation about some bad news, or some things where we missed, or some things where we have to make some decisions. But it's that transparency to help us build the relationship that we have today, and being honest and just saying that's the story, that's what's happening, and these are the notice, decide, and act moments that we have to work through based on what the data is telling us.
Yeah. To Dory's point there, we always had a very close relationship with our CFO as well when I was a practitioner. And, even though you might not want to share some bad news with them, I always could say that I felt comfortable, walking into their office at any given time to tell them what, needed to be said. What's the one piece of advice you'd share with a finance leader looking to make a change in their organization?
I would say just embrace change. I mean, I look back over my 30-some years, so much change. And we talked about technology earlier, and 30 years ago, I didn't imagine what is in business today or where I would be. But I can tell you that change ultimately has provided opportunity for me, both personally and professionally. I go back to 1999 when the company I was with, a small, mid-sized company being sold to a large international organization with significant growth aspirations. When I went to work for my client, that's not what I was thinking. That's not what I thought was in store for me. Here I was going to go work for a company that they weren't the ones that originally hired me. And I had just been on the opposite side of the table during a sale, which brings certain challenges. So I had some trepidation. But really, as I look back, that was, and I probably didn't realize at the time, that moment was so critical, and that change, and ultimately being able to get my head around and accept the change. Hey, now it's changed. Now how am I going to, hey, hold it, this actually provides a big opportunity for me. Now what am I going to do about it? So to me, it's not just for CFOs and treasurers, but I think we need to embrace change. And it's hard sometimes. I get it. But we normally don't have the power to stop it anyway, so you're better off to embrace it and have some success with it.
I think, from our leadership, we talk about IQ, but one of our things that comes from our leadership within Kyriba, for example, is our AQ, our adaptability quotient, and being able to navigate and change and adapt with what's going on out there in the world and what's impacting us. So we're coming to a close here, gentlemen, and I guess I'll pass one question. I'll pass you both this question, and then we'll wrap up. So considering our audience of who's listening to this, it's diverse. You have individuals that are listening from a CFO seat, from a VP of finance seat, from a treasurer seat, all the way through to an analyst seat, or somebody who might be just starting out their career. So Kevin, I'll let you lead off. Just what is one important thing that our listeners should be aware of in their current role?
Well, I have difficulty keeping it to one, but I'll try and be brief. Typically, when I answer or when I look at my career, or when I give, if you view it as advice, it's comes back to leadership. And to me, leadership is not a position. It's not a title. It's a choice. We can all choose to be leaders. You don't have to be the CFO. You don't have to be the treasurer in order to help unleash somebody's potential, to bring people together, to collaborate in order to seize an opportunity. That's the reason for me. It's leadership typically would be the first thing. I have a close second, but I'll save that one for a couple items. The ability to anticipate, because it creates risk and opportunities. The third thing is hire, as you're hiring leaders, hire for leaders that can deal with uncertainty, because it's that uncertainty that a lot of times we see the risk, but the uncertainty also provides opportunities. And lastly, it's right up there with, it's part of leadership is develop your team. Include them, listen to them, empower them, give them opportunities, because ultimately sustainability of the team and the company really comes back to having sustainable teams. Sometimes I think people look at a strong leader as somebody that the team can't do without. I view it the opposite. I view it if the leader is strong, they have 100%. Developed the team such that when the leader moves on, they are still sustainably successful long term.
I love that. Dory, what's your one thing that people should be listening to right now?
I couldn't agree with Kevin more. I think it's about empowerment. It's about making sure that you don't micro manage, and just giving the opportunity for the team to innovate. Not only innovate, but bring ideas to the table and help them realize those ideas, give them the opportunity to present those ideas and champion those ideas cross-functionally within the organization, and provide exposure to different areas of the organization, because ultimately your reflection as a leader is on the team, not yourself. And it's also about how quickly you're able to elevate that team to its highest potential, and they're only as good as the tools you provide them. So that's where it's important to have the technology in place, give them the time to be innovative, and give them the time to reflect and be thoughtful in how to push forward their projects.
Hard to argue either of those. Very much agree with each of those, and something I think, as Kevin said, we could go on and on. I think on that topic, but our time is ending here. So I did want to thank you, Kevin, and thanks Dory for your time today. Thank you, Holly, as always as well, and obviously thank you to all of our listeners. Super interesting conversation, of course, with our good friend Dory, who I think Holly and I know very, very well and could talk to for quite some time, but also from Kevin and hearing from him. Again, I think just if we draw back to the prior episode with Adam, right, just so many parallels and similarities there that we see from Kevin, now retired, but obviously still just exhibits such that CFO mentality. I think what they brought to the conversation, that is, I think something we continuously always like kind of hear about in what we do, Holly, is the building the business case for value. I think for any solution, whether it's a treasury, a financial solution, or even if it's a different type of technology, ultimately we need to build business cases. We need to build the value in order to sell internally, right? And I think people like Dory has had such great experience in doing that, and obviously has made a career of it. But that to me has always been was always kind of the missing link from my experience in technology. Was always like what you and I do on the solution engineering side of things. It's not going to say it's easy, but that part is only half of the equation. It's then, well, how do I go ahead and buy something like this that we always kind of hear people sometimes struggle with, and where people like Dory can come in and really, really help. But it's important that they have that alignment with the executive sponsor, right? In this case being Kevin, for example, and having alignment with the CFO. And lastly, one of the things I'd love to get your opinion on, Holly, is just the continuous improvement, which I think has become more challenging because of the world changing around us so rapidly, whether it's the AI or whether it's regulatory changes that seem to pop up every 5 minutes now. Staying ahead of that is so challenging. And one part is, we can work together, manager to employee and do trainings, but you can't rely on that only. You have to be autonomous, and I'd love to hear from you on those topics, but also related to how you learn more or experience something different by not just waiting around for somebody to train you for something.
I think you really just need to be able to feel comfortable enough to have those conversations and to be honest about what you think the benefits are. And then along the lines of the continuous improvement, it's just so important for employees to constantly be working to improve their knowledge and skill set, especially in the technology roles. Everything's changing. I mean, everything's evolving and getting more complex. You need to be paying attention to, what's coming out, looking into things, reviewing articles. And I think what's really cool is that, companies, including our company, have started rolling out more like autonomous learning, right? So there's places that we can go to now to read up on the latest information and to better understand, how AI is working and how it's working specifically within our company. And this allows us to be able to understand our role better and be able to be better prepared for these changes as they occur. I know I've utilized these tools myself. I'll watch videos and, try to make sure I'm up to date with all the changes going on within our software, as well as changes that are going on in the industry. And I just think it's very important for employees to take a more independent role when it comes to their ongoing continuous learning.
I think what we'll see as a common theme in these episodes is the discussion around AI. And it's not just learning about AI, but it's also like learning how to use AI.
Yes.
And I would say it is quintessentially important in what we just talked about, and something that I am leveraging myself, no shame whatsoever, to help me learn and understand things and understand concepts that I have not had experience on. I still don't believe that we're at a point of that being the norm for everybody.
Right.
I think it will be, though, and I think, as you would know, internally, we have developed our own language models. We've developed our own AI, and I am using that every single. In fact, we know our bot, our assistant, the pre-sales one, is the second most used. We got to get to the first, but I hammer on that thing all day because it helps me understand something. It gives me. Is it training? No, but it gets me it gets me set up for training to go deeper on something, or gets me pointed in the right direction on some topic that I'm not aware of. I use an example from last month where I didn't understand or never had experience with the classification, the balance sheet classification for Japanese intercompany loans. It's very, very obscure. Sure, I could have probably read through some 120-page accounting standard white paper where AI kind of got me started there, so I could have avoided some of that and gave me the basic principles for me to get my understanding, so then I could go deeper into the areas that I was unfamiliar with. And I think that is going to be something that's just going to become the norm. I think it is becoming the norm, like internally in our little microcosm of a team, but to like see that in the broader sense, I think is not there yet, but will happen quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we'll talk about AI, I'm sure, plenty in the upcoming episodes, but let's end there. To never miss an episode, subscribe wherever you listen. I'm Tom Gavaghan.
And I'm Holly McNulty.
And this is Liquid.